Hello and welcome to Insights, the podcast with your host, Joe Pane. Join me in this deep exploration of our personal journeys from ambition to meaning, where we stop living life fast and start living life deep. This is a journey of waking up and realizing that our lives have never been about us, but about others. True success leaves positive ripple effects on other souls. I believe that success needs to be redefined from our own personal ambitious endeavors to be redefined as the value that we leave and give to others around us. Join me now as we begin this journey to deeper connections, even more fulfillment, some fun, curiosity, life, love, and all good things. Your deeper journey from ambition to meaning starts right now. Hello and welcome to episode 16, season 2 of Insights. I hope you're all well. Joe here. Thanks again for tuning in. And today I thought we would focus a little bit more deeply into this thing called identity. At recent trainings with various groups, there's a metaphor that I've been enjoying sharing that has been challenging or been thought-provoking in terms of who we could possibly really be. And I've got to say that a lot of us, are so deeply ensconced or deeply buried in our identity through various expressions like our career or the identity of father or mother or husband or wife and all these different roles that we play. And what I would love to share with you is a different perspective on identity. And what I would love for you to do, and only if you want to, of course, is I would love for you to just open your mind and don't necessarily agree with everything I'm saying and don't necessarily disagree with everything I'm saying, but to let it simmer in the middle somewhere with a curiosity without necessarily even any opinion. Just look at it. Look at what it is that we're going to be exploring here today when it comes to identity. So the metaphor I want to share with you is the metaphor of the limousine or a car, where you've got a driver and you've got a passenger in the back. The car represents our body, our physical body. The driver represents our soul, our heart, or our values. As I've shared in past podcasts, values aren't something that we create. Values are discovered. We discover our values through living life. We discover our values through engaging in challenging experiences in life. It's these various adventures that we go on, whether it's a physical challenge or a spiritual challenge or an intellectual challenge or a professional development career challenge. It's in those moments that we really get to connect with aspects of ourselves that we don't necessarily have access to when everything is flowing along just nicely and beautifully. So there's a whole other conversation when it comes to values, and we'll save that for another podcast. But the driver is predominantly our soul or our values, which means we know where we're going. That part of us just knows the road to take. The passenger represents our mind, represents our ego mind, represents the ego or personality or mind part of us that lives under the illusion. And here's the part where I just want you to be open to this. So let's just explore it and see where it takes us. The mind part lives under the illusion that it creates everything, that it creates all of our results. Now, if you think of the metaphor, what is the job of a passenger? To enjoy the ride, to behave, to not tell the driver where to go. The driver already knows where you're going. It's not to interfere with the car. It's not to hop into the front and change gears for the driver or take over the steering wheel or sit on the lap of the driver and try to take over the controls of the accelerator and the brake and the direction. It's to simply sit. And the passenger's job or the mind's job is phenomenal in the sense of generating experiences, generating perceptions, creating the psychological construct of how we experience time. The passenger's job is to be creative, absolutely, in the sense of fantastical thinking or reflecting on a problem or perceiving the forest that you're driving by or whatever it might be. The mind is there as a source of entertainment. In a moment, in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to quote you one of my most favorite authors on the entire planet, who is Dr. David R. Hawkins. We'll come to him in a moment. His language is like a linguistic symphony. It is beautiful. And I'm sure you'll agree when you hear me quote his thoughts on what mind actually is. So the mind is where a lot of people's identity, the perception of their identity sits, because it's the mind that creates our experience of our workplace. It's through the mind that we experience our relationships. It's through the mind that we experience and make up the meanings of what it means to be a husband, wife, father, mother, boss, leader, employee, all the roles that we play. But it doesn't actually create anything. This is the part that I want you to remain open with, because the driver is the one that's taking us to our destiny. And as a passenger, if we misbehave and try to take over the driving or interfere, that's where all kinds of problems ensue. That's where life doesn't seem to flow. But instead, if we, as the passenger, if that aspect of us, the mind part of us, if it just sits there and just enjoys the ride and enjoys the experience and just has faith in the soul, has faith in the values, has faith in the emotional compass that drives that soul, if you like, we need to just listen to it. How many times have we heard people say that we need to listen to our body? Well, sometimes the car or the driver will say to us, hey, listen, we just need to pull over because our left front tire is a little bit flat, or we need to go and pick up some fuel, or I just need to clean these insects off the windscreen. The driver will take the car off-road to get it fixed or whatever it needs to be. We need to listen to that. How many times have we not listened to our body, where there's a metaphorical puncture going on and we keep pushing forward? We keep rolling up doing those 60, 70, 80-hour weeks until our body breaks down or until we end up getting sick somehow. So it's about listening to what's within us. Khalil Gibran, my favorite philosopher, David Hawkins is one of my favorite authors, and Khalil Gibran is one of my favorite philosophers. And he said that when we're born, our work is placed in our heart, and our job is to find what it is. So our mission is to find what that is, and that's actually learning to listen to the soul. So when we begin on the journey, the spiritual journey, which is a very challenging journey of letting go, of identifying with our mind and identifying more with the soul, our perspective changes. We don't get caught up in the dramas of life so much, and we start living life in flow and in faith to that. So just while I'm on that, let me share with you these amazing words, and I'll go through these very slowly because Hawkins says a lot here. It's about 3 paragraphs. It'll probably take me about 2 or 3 minutes to read this out to you, maybe a little bit longer. But just listen to these words and notice what comes up for you as you hear these words. So this is Hawkins in his book called The Eye of the Eye, where he's actually talking about how to reconnect to the pristine state of the soul. And he talks about the mind. So here we go. Listen to these beautiful, symphonic, melodic, beatific words. These are just wonderful words. He says, one is not really ruled by the mind at all. What the mind, remember that's the passenger in the car, what the mind reveals is an endless stream of options, all disguised as memories, fantasies, fears, concepts, and so on. To get free of domination by the mind, it is only necessary to realize that its parade of subjects, that's the thoughts that we have. So when he says subjects, he's talking about thoughts. The parade of thoughts, so the parade of subjects, is merely, and I love this, listen to this, the parade of thought or subjects is merely an arbitrary cafeteria of selections wending their way across the screen of the mind. So I'll say that again. I'll just repeat that last sentence. To get free of the domination by the mind, it's only necessary to realize, that's awareness, to realize that the parade of subjects is merely an arbitrary cafeteria of selections wending their way across the screen of the mind. Amazing. One is not forced to feel resentment by a negative memory, nor does one have to buy into a fearful thought about the future. These are only options. I'm still reading Hawkins. These are only options. So he says we don't need to buy into these feelings or these thoughts or these meanings that we have around some negative memory. Okay, so back onto Hawkins' words now. These are only options. The mind is like a television set running its various channels for selection. And one does not have to follow any particular temptation of thought. Oh my God, how beautiful is that? One can fall into the temptation of feeling sorry for oneself or angry or worried. The secret attraction of all these options is that they offer an inner payoff or a secret satisfaction, which is the source of the attraction of the mind's thoughts. Now, let's just break down what he just said there. So let me just go back to just reread this little paragraph and we'll break it down. So one is not forced to feel resentment by a negative memory. It is just simply a selection. It's like a channel. Nor does one have to buy into a fearful thought about the future. These are all, he says, these are only options. It's the mind, he says, is like a television set running its various channels, of which we can just select any channel we want. And one doesn't have to follow any particular temptation of thought. We don't have to remain with one channel. A thought is simply something that is wending. He says wending, I say winding, its way through our mind, through the screen. And it's our choice whether we want to follow that thought through or not. Now, obviously, we're talking here about unresourceful thoughts, but we can also have resourceful thoughts. Whichever way, it's just another channel. And listen to this, I'll read this part again. He says, one can fall into the temptation of feeling sorry for oneself or angry or worried, right? And then he says the secret attraction, or what in coaching we call the payoff, the secondary gain is what we call it in coaching in my world. The secondary gain, he calls it the secret attraction of all of these options. These are the dramatical options, the drama channels, is that they offer an inner payoff or secret satisfaction, right? A secondary gain, which is the source of the attraction of the mind's thoughts. So it is the secondary gain that attracts us to these dramatical channels. I mean, how many times have we made up things about a conversation that we haven't had yet, or a meeting that we haven't gone to yet, or a situation that we haven't experienced yet? All made up in the mind, and which generates emotions within us. It's incredible. Let's go back to Hawkins' words. He continues to say, if these payoffs are refused, it will be discovered that at all times, behind the thought screen, there is a silent, invisible, thought-free space of joy. Let me say that again. If these payoffs are refused, so that means if we're not going down not being attracted to the secondary gain of drama and all the justifications and the crap that brings up, if we refuse that payoff or that secondary gain, he says, it will be discovered that at all times, which means it's always been there, behind the thought screen, that's beyond the television set, right? There is a silent, invisible, thought-free space of joy. That's the soul. That's the driver, guys. That's the driver of the car. This is an option. This is back to Hawkins' words now. This is an option that is always available. But to be experienced, it has to be chosen above all other tempting options. The source of joy is always present, always available, and not dependent on circumstances. So the source of joy, and this is going back to me now just for a moment before we go back to Hawkins, is that the source of joy is independent of whatever you see from outside the car. It's independent of any thought, any experience, any meaning that you've cast on any experience. It's independent of all that. It sits there in the background like the sun. The sun is there all the time. Even in the dark, there's sun. It's always there. It's just a matter of which way the earth is facing. So back to Hawkins' words. So I'll say that again. The source of joy is always present, always available, and not dependent on circumstances. There are only two obstacles, he says, only two obstacles to this. One, the ignorance that it is always available, which is another word for ignorance is lack of awareness. So that's three words. So three other words for the word ignorance is lack of awareness. So he says the ignorance that it is always available and present. So let me read that again. There are only two obstacles stopping us from getting to this thought-free space of joy. One, the ignorance that it is always available and present. And two, valuing something other than peace and joy, above that peace and joy, because of the secret pleasure of the payoff. So if we're valuing the drama of the secondary gain or the secret pleasure of the payoff, if you're prioritizing that over peace and joy, you'll get to experience whatever your priorities are. So I just thought I'd share that with you. I love that passage. It's one of my most favorite passages of the work of Hawkins that I've read over the years. And I trust and hope that today's episode has been thought-provoking, ironically, that it's given you a different perspective on becoming curious about how you can become the driver rather than remain living under the shadows and the illusion of the passenger. It's the driver that knows. And the way that we connect through that to the driver is through faith. It's not based on a linear, logical, proof-ridden, science-driven direction. All those aspects of science and proof and direction have their place. Absolutely, they do. I'm not disrespecting that. But what I want to say is that ultimately, to discover who we really are, it's based on faith. And it's a journey to the soul, which ain't for the faint of heart. So I hope that the words of Hawkins and some of my thoughts that I've shared with you today have been thought-provoking or mind-shifting or perspective-shifting. And if not, so be it. Just let it simmer in the middle. As I said at the outset, don't agree with me, don't disagree with me. Just let this simmer and perhaps reflect on this. If you meditate, reflect on it in the meditation or reflect on it in any way that suits you. So I hope you've enjoyed today's chat. I certainly have, as you can tell. And I look forward to reconnecting with you for the next episode of Insights. Once again, thanks for listening. Appreciating all of your support. Really just love it and enjoy, and I'll reconnect with you in the next episode. So enjoy your morning, enjoy your afternoon, enjoy your evening, wherever you are. Talk soon. Thanks again. Bye for now. I'm Joe Pane, and you've been listening to Insights, the podcast. If you haven't yet, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. You can now follow my insights on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'm looking forward to being with you again very soon in the next episode of Insights, the podcast.